3 years ago, my daughter told me I wasn't welcome in her home. Not for a visit, not for a weekend, not ever again. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. The sky was a pale winter blue, and the wind carried that sharp bite that seeps into your bones. I'd driven over after she texted earlier in the week saying we should talk in person. I thought maybe we'd have coffee at her kitchen table, sort out whatever tension had been building between us. Instead, she met me at the door, one hand on the frame, as if she were holding it in place against a storm. Her face was calm, but her eyes, they were colder than I'd ever seen. "You're not welcome here anymore, Mom," she said. No hesitation, no softening in her tone. I blinked, trying to absorb the words. "Olivia, what are you talking about? It's not a good time." She interrupted, her voice clipped like she'd rehearsed this moment. "I need my space, my peace. You can't just show up here expecting to stay." I glanced past her into the hallway, expecting to see some sign that this was temporary. Maybe a half smile to tell me she didn't mean it. But the distance in her expression told me this wasn't about a bad day. This was final. The cold air swirled around my shoulders as she shifted her weight, subtly urging me back toward the steps. My car was still parked at the curb, the engine ticking as it cooled. "I don't understand," I said quietly, searching her face. "You don't have to," she replied. And for a moment, I could swear there was relief in her eyes, as though closing this door on me was lifting a weight from her own shoulders. She didn't slam it. She didn't yell. She just closed it softly, but it felt like a steel gate locking shut behind me. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the painted wood, feeling the world tilt under my feet. Then I walked down the path to my car, hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. Before we go on, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. That's how we build a circle of women who truly understand and support each other. That drive home was silent. No music, no calls, just the hum of the road and the thought that kept circling in my mind. If I wasn't welcome there anymore, I'd have to build a place where I was. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the small apartment I'd rented years before, staring at the bare walls. The place smelled faintly of disinfectant, the kind landlords use to mask the scent of whatever came before. My entire life felt like that. A thin cover over something I didn't want to face. The rent was cheap, but the carpet was worn, the paint chipped. The single window looked out over the alley behind a strip mall. At night, the hum of the neon open sign from the diner across the way seeped into my room, a constant reminder that other people had somewhere to go, something to do. I had my sewing machine. That was it. My one tool, my one lifeline. For years, it had been a hobby, a way to make a little extra income for vacations or Christmas gifts. Now it was the only thing standing between me and falling behind on rent. The first weeks were the hardest. Orders came slowly, hemming a neighbor's pants, repairing a torn coat, sewing curtains for a family who just moved into a new apartment. Every job was small, but I treated each one like it was worth a fortune. I worked until my fingers cramped and my back ached, not because I loved it, but because I had no choice. I learned to live with less. I stopped buying anything that didn't serve a purpose. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. Every penny went into a jar I kept at the back of my closet. It wasn't much at first, coins, a few crumpled bills, but I guarded it fiercely. That jar became my symbol, my proof that I was moving forward, even if no one else could see it. Months turned into a year, and that jar filled faster than I expected. Word spread about my work. A wedding dress here, a set of custom drapes there. I never turned down a project no matter how strange or challenging. Every stitch brought me closer to something I could almost taste but didn't dare name. Then came the day I walked into a small, run-down house on the edge of town. Paint-peeling yard overgrown for sale by owner sign, leaning crooked in the dirt. Most people would have seen a money pit. I saw the first place that could truly be mine. It took everything in my savings jar to make the down payment. The day I signed the papers, I stood in the empty living room, the air heavy with dust and possibility. The floors creaked. The kitchen was outdated, but it was mine. No one could tell me I didn't belong here. Over the next 18 months, I turned that forgotten house into a home. I painted the walls myself, sanded the floors, planted roses in the front yard. I worked during the day, sewed at night, and poured every bit of myself into this place. And just when the smell of fresh paint had finally replaced the scent of neglect, Olivia called. It had been nearly 3 years since I'd heard her voice when my phone lit up with her name. I was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, pressing the last of the spring bulbs into place. The ringtone cut through the hum of a distant lawnmower and the chatter of sparrows in the maple tree. Olivia. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The way you might look at a photograph of someone you used to know. Then I swiped to answer. "Hi, Mom." Her tone was syrupy. Careful, the kind of sweetness that feels manufactured. "Olivia." My voice came out steady, though my hands were still dirty from the soil. "This is unexpected." She laughed lightly, as though we'd spoken just last week. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately, wondering how you've been." "I've been fine," I said, glancing at the rose bush I'd planted my first week here, the one that had survived frost and neglect before finally blooming. "What's on your mind?" There was a pause, a small hitch in her breathing. "Well, I've been in a bit of a tough spot. My lease is ending, and the rent on anything decent is ridiculous right now. I thought maybe I could stay with you just for a while until I get things sorted." Her words landed with a dull weight stirring memories I'd tried to bury. The cold air at her doorstep, the look in her eyes when she told me I wasn't welcome. Just temporarily, she rushed to add. It would help me get back on my feet, and of course I'd contribute to the bills. I sat back on my heels, brushing dirt from my hands. Something about the way she said contribute felt more like a promise made to get through a door than something she intended to keep. "Olivia," I said, choosing my words slowly. "You made it very clear 3 years ago that my presence in your home wasn't welcome." "That was different," she replied quickly, almost too quickly. We were both under stress. "I shouldn't have said it like that, but things are different now. I thought we could, start fresh." I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to start feeling it. "It's not like I'm asking for much," she went on. "Just a place to stay. Family should be there for each other." There it was. The word family used like a key to unlock the past, but keys can open doors or lock them. And I wasn't about to forget which she'd done last time. "I'll think about it," I said at last. "But I need to understand what you're really asking." We ended the call with her sounding relieved, but I knew better. Something in her voice told me this wasn't about closeness or reconciliation. It was about convenience. And I was about to find out just how much. After I hung up, I stayed there in the garden for a long while, staring at the dirt under my nails. She had said family should be there for each other, but what she meant was family should be useful. I knew the difference. By the next morning, I decided I wouldn't rely on guesswork. I needed facts. I called an old friend, someone who'd seen me through more than one storm, Diane. She worked at a small law office downtown, the kind of place where every case crossed her desk before it crossed to judges. "Can you find out what you can about Olivia's situation?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hands were gripping the phone tight enough to ache. Diane didn't ask for backstory. She'd been there when my world cracked 3 years ago. "Give me a couple of days," she said. "It only took one." The next afternoon, I walked into her office. The smell of strong coffee clung to the air, and papers were stacked in uneven towers on every surface. She slid a thin manila folder across her desk toward me. "You might want to sit down." Inside were prints of court filings, eviction notices, and most jarring, a copy of a credit application with my name listed as a reference. I had never agreed to that. "She's been behind on rent for months," Diane explained. "The landlord's filed for eviction twice. She's got maxed out credit cards, and she's been using your name to make herself look stable." I felt my stomach tighten like someone had pulled a cord through my middle and yanked hard. "That's not all," Diane continued, lowering her voice. "There are small claims pending from a few people. Unpaid work, borrowed money, never returned. Nothing massive on its own, but together it paints a picture I couldn't ignore." Driving home, I kept replaying the conversation with Olivia in my mind. The careful tone, the sudden talk of starting fresh. And now I knew she wasn't just looking for shelter. She was looking for a shield. My home, my name, my stability all as cover while her own life fell apart. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table. The folder spread open in front of me. The light from the window fell across the papers, illuminating every line of debt, every desperate move she'd made. If she thought she could just slide back into my life without consequences, she was wrong. That's when a thought hit me sharp and clean. I needed to know how far she'd go if she thought I couldn't help her. It wouldn't just be about saying yes or no to her moving in. It would be about finding out exactly who she was now and letting her show me with her own words. 2 days later, I dialed Olivia's number with the folder from Diane sitting right in front of me. The papers were neatly stacked like evidence waiting for a trial. But I wasn't ready for the trial yet. First, I needed a confession. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and almost cheerful. "Mom, I was hoping you'd call." I let a beat of silence stretch before answering, softening my tone as if I were carrying something fragile. "Olivia, I wish this was a better call, but I have some bad news." Her tone shifted instantly. "What happened?" "I made some bad choices with my savings," I said, injecting just enough tremor to make it sound real. "The repairs on the house cost more than I planned, and a client backed out on a big order. I'm barely scraping by right now." For a moment, there was only quiet breathing on her end. Then, "Oh wow, that's not good. Not good." That was it. Not, "I'm sorry," or "what can I do?" Just not good. "I'm not sure how I'm going to manage the bills this month," I continued, laying it on thicker. "I might even have to sell the house if things get worse." This time she didn't wait. Sell the house. Well, if that's the case, maybe me moving in isn't the best idea. There it was, the first crack in the mask. I could almost hear her recalculating, the gears turning. I decided to push. "I thought maybe we could figure it out together," I said softly, as if I were still holding on to some shred of hope. Her reply came fast, too fast. Honestly, Mom, I just don't think I can deal with that kind of instability right now. I have my own stuff to handle, you know. I sat back in my chair watching sunlight spill across the table, catching on the edge of Diane's folder. Every word she spoke was another nail in the coffin she didn't even realize she was building for herself. So I said, letting my voice go flat, "If I can't offer you a stable place, you're not interested." She hesitated, then sighed. I need something that works for me." "You understand, right?" "Yes, Olivia," I said, a steel thread running under my calm tone. "I understand perfectly." We ended the call politely. She even tossed in a "love you" as though it could erase the truth she'd just handed me. But when I set the phone down, I knew I had exactly what I needed. She thought she was the one in control, walking away from my problems. But what she didn't know was that the real problems were about to knock on her door, and I'd be the one sending them. The morning after our last call, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee cooling in front of me. The folder from Diane lay open each page, a quiet reminder that this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about survival. Olivia hadn't asked to move in because she missed me. She'd asked because I had something she needed: stability. My home was safe, my bills were paid, my name was clean, and she wanted to use all of it as a shield while her own life crumbled. I thought about the words she'd used on the phone. Family should be there for each other. It was a phrase meant to disarm, to make me feel guilty for hesitating. But family, I realized, isn't about using each other's roofs as shelter from your own storms. It's about trust. And we didn't have that anymore. So I began to prepare. Not for a fight. I've had enough of those in my life, but for a conversation that would leave no room for misunderstanding. First, I made sure every part of my financial life was secure. I updated the passwords on my accounts. I checked that my homeowner's insurance was current. I moved my emergency savings into an account under a different bank entirely. Then I called my neighbor Carol. She and her husband had been living next door for over a decade, and we'd built the kind of friendship where we kept spare keys for each other. "If Olivia comes by when I'm not here," I told her, "please don't let her in, just call me." Carol didn't ask why. She just said, "Of course." That's the thing about real friends. They don't need all the details to have your back. Finally, I sat down and wrote out what I needed to say to Olivia. No raised voice, no accusations she could twist, just a clear statement of my boundaries and the reasons I'd made my decision. I practiced it out loud, making sure there was no hesitation in my tone, because I knew the moment would come when she'd look at me with that same expression she had at her front door 3 years ago, the one that said she was in control, and this time I would be ready. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the past. It was about protecting the life I had built inch by inch from nothing. And I wasn't going to hand it over to someone who had shown me in words and in actions that my worth only mattered when it was convenient for her. She came on a Sunday afternoon unannounced, the way people do when they hope surprise will soften a no. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Hi, Mom." Olivia's smile was bright, a little too bright. "I've been thinking about everything." "Go on," I said. She took a breath. "I realized my timing was off the other day, but I have a real plan now, one that helps both of us." Her eyes flicked past me into the hallway, measuring the distance to the life she wanted to enter. "I could move in, help with the place, and we put the house on the market together. Prices are great right now. You could downsize. I could help manage the sale." And since I'm your only daughter, it just makes sense that we'd both benefit." "We both benefit," I repeated evenly. "Right. We're family," she softened her voice. "And you shouldn't be carrying all this responsibility alone. I can take things off your plate." I let a silence settle just long enough for the words to weigh what they were worth. "Olivia," I said at last. 3 days ago, when you believed I was struggling, you said, 'Moving in wasn't the best idea.' Not a single question about how I was going to manage. No offer to help with groceries, utilities, repairs. You walked away." "That was before I thought it through," she said quickly. "This is smarter. If we sell, you get cash in hand. I get a fresh start, and you get a portion of money you didn't earn." I finished for her. "Because that's what this is, not a home, a payout." Her jaw tightened. "That's unfair." "What's unfair," I said, "calm as a level table, is listing me as a reference on a credit application without my consent." I held her gaze. "Yes, I know. I have copies of the filings. The eviction notices the debts. I know exactly why you want to move in, and it isn't because you miss your mother." A flush crept up her neck. "You went digging into my life. I went looking for the truth," I said, "because you stopped offering it." She tried a different key. "I'm trying to fix things to be close again. You're making this transactional." I almost smiled at the irony. "When I told you I might have to sell, you told me you'd better look for another place. That wasn't grief. It was arithmetic. And now you're back with a plan that turns my roof into your exit strategy." Her eyes hardened. "So this is punishment?" "No." I stepped slightly forward, my hand still on the doorframe. "This is a boundary. This house isn't a bargaining chip. It's where I learned I can stand without leaning on anyone who treats me like a spare wallet." She looked past me again, reaching for some angle in the furniture, the walls, the life she wanted to repurpose. "You don't have to be cruel, Mom. Cruel would be letting you move in and sell what I bled to build just to feed the same habits that buried you in debt. Mercy sometimes looks like a closed door." She swallowed. "So, what do you expect me to do?" "Work. Tell the truth. Pay what you owe. And when you speak to me, mean it." I lifted a small stack of papers from the entry table and held them at my side. "If you want resources, a credit counselor, a payment plan template, a list of open clerical jobs, I'll email them tonight. If you want my house, the answer is no." Her voice thinned. "I'm your daughter." "And I am your mother," I said, steady as a plumb line. "I don't co-sign lies, I don't finance denial, and I don't sell my peace to make your crisis feel like a plan." For a moment, neither of us moved. The wind shifted on the porch, carrying the smell of the roses I'd planted my first week here. She tried one last door. "Can we at least talk about splitting the equity?" "The deed has one name," I said. "Mine. The decision does too." Something in her face fell then. Not drama, not tears, just the recognition that the house she wanted was finally out of reach. "When you want a relationship, come back without numbers," I added. I closed the door the way she had closed hers on me, quietly, firmly, with the lesson built into the hinge. Some doors don't open to pressure, only to respect. I stood in the hallway for a moment after the door latched, my hand still resting on the wood. Outside, I heard the sound of her footsteps fading down the path, the gravel crunching under shoes that had carried her here expecting control. The air inside my home was still not heavy, not tense, just still. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, letting the steam curl into the quiet. From where I stood, I could see the garden through the window. The roses I'd planted, the grass I'd trimmed myself, the life I had rebuilt from the ground up. 3 years ago, I had driven away from her house with nothing but my car keys and a pit in my stomach, believing that maybe I had lost the only real connection I'd ever have. But I hadn't lost. I'd learned. I learned that sometimes the people who share your blood can drain your spirit faster than any stranger. I learned that boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They're gates that protect it. And I learned that I am not measured by who chooses to stand beside me, but by how I stand when they walk away. She wanted my house. She wanted my safety, my work, my stability, without respecting the cost of any of it. But I didn't build this life to hand it over to someone who only knocks when their own doors have closed. I took a slow sip of coffee and felt something deep inside settle into place. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was peace. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't afraid of her anger, her disappointment, or her absence. I didn't need her to approve of my choices. I only needed to make the choices that kept me whole. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the roses through the open window. I smiled because they'd bloomed on their own schedule like me. No rush, no approval needed, just roots deep enough to weather what comes. If she comes back one day with nothing in her hands but honesty, the door will be here. But until then, it stays closed, and that is not cruelty. That is self-respect. I turned from the window, the sunlight spilling across my table, and felt the calm certainty of someone who knows they have protected what matters most. This house, my peace, my dignity, and I will make sure no one takes those from me ever again.